Serious, people who have been clinically dead and brought back to life. What was your experience? When I was 10 years old, I fell from the roof of our house and landed on my head. I was in and out of consciousness on the way to the hospital via ambulance. When I recovered, they said I was legally dead at one point at the hospital, but they revived me with paddles after 5 minutes. I remember nothing at all, only the darkness of a deep dreamless sleep. The headache when I came to was unbearable. I was extremely lucky not to have any major spinal damage from the fall. Just a huge lump on my head that went away after about a week. No other injuries. Maybe that's what really happens when you die. Just the blackness of sleep that you're not aware of. Except it stays that way forever. Aside from the experience everyone really talks about when they are dying, while they think it is what they experience when they are actually dead, such as seeing a light or loved ones. There was absolutely nothing. No sense of calm. No darkness. Nothing. One moment I was dying and seeing things, and the next I was coming back alive. I was dead for 2 minutes and 42 seconds. If not breathing and no heartbeat is considered dead. And yeah. Same thing. Apparently I collapsed. All I know is I was one place 1 min. Then I woke up on life support. Like going to sleep without the dreams. You fall asleep and wake up. That was my experience. I remember being in the room I collapsed in. Then waking up in a hospital bed. No darkness. No light. No visions. Just all of a sudden awake in the hospital. I don't remember a thing. I had a pretty traumatic experience before I died that I would prefer not to revisit. When I came back, it was like waking up from a long nap. Nothing in between. It is scary but also a bit comforting. It all depends on your perspective. Pretty uneventful. I shot dope. Got really high. Then dropped to the floor. My friends packed my groin with ice cubes and took turns punching me in the face. But I just lay there. Unresponsive. EMT saved me. I almost certainly suffered some amount of brain damage. As I was gone for several minutes. There was no bright light. Nothing noteworthy. I'm convinced that when you go, you're worm food. No fancy cosmic procession. The paramedics treated me like human garbage after I came back. And for most of the ambulance ride to the hospital, they treated me like an actual person once I was lucid enough to be articulate. All I could think of was my mother. If I had stayed dead, she would have perished from grief. Last time I ever stuck a needle in my arm. About 13 years ago. Thought I'd buck the usual trend of peaceful nothingness with my father's experience. He was slowly dying for weeks after his gallbladder removal was utterly botched. And the hospital interpreted his pleas to do something about the wrenching pain to mean he was a druggie, obviously looking for a score. It all came to a head one day when my 10-year-old sister had to call 911 because my father was literally about to die. The doctor told my mother that my father's levels were no longer compatible with life. He was pretty much dead. His heart had stopped several times. So she should expect to lose her husband anytime. My father remembers being in the room, slightly above everyone, watching like a spectator. He was accepting death, but was very sad about it. He had 3 young children he wanted to see grow up. He didn't want to go. He remembers thinking and feeling these things while he watched doctors try to get him going again. His next memory was waking strapped to the hospital bed with a breathing tube down his throat. Got one arm free and pulled out the tube before someone found him. Over 25 years later he's survived lots of stuff. Stage 4 cancer. Graves' disease. Various forms of hepatitis. But that was the closest to death he got. And for him in that exact circumstance, there was some existence outside his body. Your dad sounds like a total badass. It was 4 days after I had given birth. I was sitting on my bed holding my son when I suddenly woke up. My son was on the bed and my mom was asking if I was okay. She told me I had a seizure. Now, I've had them before. Last one had been 13 years ago, but this one felt different. I told her to call an ambulance. They get there and I tell them what happened and get loaded into the back. That's all I remember physically until the next day when I woke up in the hospital with my husband sitting in the chair next to my bed. Apparently, I had eclampsia that caused seizures and a high fever. He said at one point they had to revive me. During this I remember dreaming that I had a choice whether I wanted to live or die. I thought about it and knew my husband couldn't handle 2 kids by himself, so I decided to stay. Everything went dark and I woke up in a hospital bed. After I woke up I had trouble with my memory and still do at times. My husband doesn't like to talk about it, so it's hard to get all the details. I had worked in medicine prior to this, so I knew the brain can cause things like this to happen, so I just chalk it up to that. The only thing I remember is that there was no light, no tunnel, no clouds or anything. Just peace. The most amazing peace I've ever felt. Nothing mattered and I wanted to be like that forever. Then I started to hear like a whisper, "Please breathe. Please wake up." It was my aunt giving me mouth-to-mouth resuscitation in the car while someone else was driving. That's when I knew I wasn't breathing. When we arrived to the ER I was rushed into one of the beds and my poor mom could see when the ECG showed that I was flatlining. Long story short, I'm here, but I spent 3 good hours trying to remember who I was because I couldn't even remember my mom or my name. Just peace. The most amazing peace I've ever felt. This is incredibly comforting to me right now. Thank you for your story. I died in the surgical theater and again in the recovery room. I don't recall anything from the surgical theater. But the recovery room, everything started burning, then I got tunnel vision. What I could see started getting further and further away and everything was fading to black. I remember trying to move my arms but feeling like they were pinned down by an unmovable object. After that, just peace and euphoria for what seemed like an eternity. Then pain. So much pain. Everything was on fire. The surgery site wasn't even the worst and it was major surgery. I started screaming as best I could. In my head it was loud. But I had a breathing tube down my throat. I wanted to start vomiting everywhere. I passed out after pulling the breathing tube out my throat and spewing everywhere. I was also convinced the recovery room crash doctor was some kind of ginger angel with ginger wings. Which is odd as I'm an atheist. After I woke up the second time I asked her out to dinner. She said no. I laughed. My best friend was hit head on by a drunk driver. He states he does remember the 10-minute ambulance ride to the hospital, but then he coded in the trauma room. He heard her voice claiming to be his grandma talking to him. He never met her as she passed before he was born. They said they were about to call it when they got a pulse back. Not sure if this counts. I suffered an atrial fibrillation which couldn't be controlled without the doctor stopping my heart and paddling me back again. 47 seconds I was clinically dead. Not a lot I know, but my memory of it was the anesthesia, then slowly vision fading out. Was like a darkness closing in. No panic. No unusual feelings. Then when I came to, almost like the reverse, just slowly woke up, heart back in normal rhythm. Can't say I saw any lights or tunnels or anything. Was playing quarters with Jack Daniels and I weighed 110 pounds at the time. Lights got all weird and fuzzy. Couldn't walk. And passed out. Stopped breathing, but I guess my buddy saw me faceplant and tried to wake me, but I wasn't responding. I guess that is when he realized I wasn't breathing and called an ambulance. Now, this one is weird because I was aware that I was dying. I mean, I was watching myself being worked on and loaded up. Then it felt like I was flying and I seemed to have arrived at this place with a river and a willow tree. That is all I can remember of that. But a few years after my best friend and best man of my wedding died, I had a dream where I was back at the river and the willow tree and he was there. I was so happy to see him and we talked. He told me a lot of things and gave me a message to give to his brother. So, when I woke up I drove over and I told his brother what had happened and gave him the message. His eyes got really big and then he started crying and hugged me. Before that his brother was really tore up and was having a hard time, but after I gave him that message he seemed to be at peace with everything. We are still really close. So, what do I think? I think my best friend and best man of my wedding will be there at the river under the willow tree when I die. My grandma was presumed dead for about 3 minutes and she had told me that it was at first black, then she saw a light and there was a voice. It sounded like her father, who passed away late 80s early 90s, and he said not yet, and my grandma woke up to my grandpa slapping her to wake her up. Me and her both thought at the last part to this day. It felt amazing. Like I was floating and didn't have to worry about anything. It was like creative mode on Minecraft. I didn't know I was dead, but I knew something was up. Waking up felt weird because my family and friends were there telling me how worried they were and the sadness they felt, but I was sad to be away from the place I was. I wish I enjoyed it more, but at the time I didn't think about, so I really couldn't have. I'm not that afraid of death anymore. But it doesn't mean I'll kill myself to go back to where I was. I do remember leaving the hospital and my first thought was I have to pay rent. It's exactly like before you were born. Was pleading a fraternity where they do hazings, paddling you, melting wax on your entire body, punching you anywhere, and after all of it, blacked out. Woke up hanging upside down. My nail being bit, fifth nail to be bit. Chili peppers on my neck. Calamansi, like lime lemon, in my mouth. Was told I didn't have pulse for like 30 seconds or so and wasn't breathing. The feeling of it was nothing. It was black. The waking up part hurts your head though, when you're upside down and don't know what the FS happening. I don't know if I was dead, my mind told me I am. But after reading some answers, me and my cousin were playing outside. I played in the garden. She was in front of the house. Suddenly I had an idea. I started running. Faster. Faster. Around the corner. And we crashed. I was so fast that I wasn't able to react to her running towards me. As I just turned around the corner, her head and arms hit my chest. As she tried to cover herself. Both of us are flying to the ground from the impact. As I hit the ground, I hit my head and I wasn't able to breathe anymore because of her running into my chest. So I was laying there. It was peaceful. I was out of my body and able to watch what happened next. I saw my body. My eyes were open and I stared at the sky. I wasn't breathing and I knew I died a few moments ago. My cousin got up, looked at me and started crying. She was dizzy as she walked to the door and got into the house. I heard her slowly going upstairs for seconds. It started to rain and the moment I realized it, I was back. Everything was black. I only felt some raindrops. And after that, pain. So much pain. My head, my chest, my lungs as they tried to pump air into my body, everything was hurting. As my vision came back, I sat up. I wanted to cry because I knew I must be afraid, but I wasn't. There was just no reason to cry, except the pain. I stood up and went inside, where my cousin was sitting on my uncle's lap and cried. Everyone asked her what's wrong and she wasn't able to say a word. I asked myself how everyone would react if they know what happened. But in my mind no one would believe me. So I said nothing.